we cannot intellectually talk about branding without talking about culture, because brands are vessels of meaning, and meaning is negotiated through our cultural subscription. And the better we understand it, the more likely we are to build stronger brands.
Hey, family. Listen, I'm so excited because today we're going to be talking with Dr. Marcus Collins. Now, he's not just another marketing guru. He's in the trenches as head of strategy at Wieden+Kennedy in New York. And now he's also a marketing professor at the University of Michigan. Dr. Marcus knows how to make brands pop and what makes consumers tick. But here's what really gets me excited about him. He has a gift for creating ideas that spread and get people moving. I mean, he's worked with everybody from Apple to Beyoncé, and now he's got this incredible book out called For the Culture. Y'all, For the Culture is real. You got to get it. And it's all about how culture shapes what we buy, what we do, and who we want to be. It's a fascinating conversation that we're about to have. And I'm so excited to dive into what exactly culture is with Dr. Marcus Collins. Dr. Marcus, I'm so glad you're able to be with us. And, you know, I've been excited about talking with you ever since we originally scheduled our visit for September. I know your travel caused you to move around, and I'm so glad that you're here now. Is there anything about your travel you want to share with us? Let us know where you went or what happened.
Well, I'm so grateful for your flexibility and so excited to be with you now. Travel has been demanding, active, but really good. Got a chance to go to Bogota, to Mexico City, to Sydney, Australia, to Singapore, and not only engage in the work that I do and evangelizing the work that I do, but also getting a chance to explore and engage in the culture of these rich places to get a better understanding of who we are, humanity, us. And by and large, that's really where my work and my interests lie, understanding us.
Well, you know, that's a big thing to do. And it's also an important thing to do. I think we can dive right into it with a history lesson to tee us up. So if you don't mind, can you just give us a 30,000 foot view or 300-foot view of the evolution of brand in our culture? Because you refer to both of those, and that's what we're here to talk about, from the first trademarks to where we are today.
Sure. So branding is an activity that we've been partaking in for over 4,000 years. Essentially, farmers would use branding irons as a way to signify that their cattle belong to them, right? So if I brought my cattle to the marketplace, it's easy to confuse it with someone else's cattle. So I put a mark on it so you know these are Collins cows. And since I sing to my cows,
you know, that was entertainment when I was growing up. We go over to the stockyard. I grew up in North Carolina. We go over
get
to
out.
called the stockyard, and we watch cattle and other animals. Mostly in our community, it was hogs being branded.
That's right. So the marking of cattle was a way by which farmers were able to signify ownership. And this is really sort of what brands were. They were a permanent mark to signify ownership. And truthfully,
unfortunately, in my neck of the woods, that was a way to signify ownership of people as well at one point in our history.
I mean, you see where I'm getting at here exactly. You know, these marks, you know, they're brutal in their practice, but very productive in their commerce. Because essentially, marks, if you translate the word brand into any Romantic or Germanic language, it translates into mark or marque or marca. So brands are marks. And over time, especially in the late 1800s, potterers would see these marks and go, oh, we can use these marks for our pottery. So when I bring my pottery to the marketplace, the way to distinguish mine from someone else's, I put a mark on it. And Josiah Wedgwood was the first to kind of do that, right? Wedgwood pottery. And then while this practice was going on, marketers were like, ooh, we could use these marks too to not only signify what's ours, but also benefit from the cognitive associations that people connect their thoughts and feelings to our products. And these marks started to become trademarks. They're marks of trade. And then by the end of the 1800s, there was some legal legislation happening in London and in Paris where these marks of ownership became legal marks. So they moved from being marks of ownership to trademarks to legal marks. And over time, marketers started to invest more and more into these marks and realized that if you start associating sort of the cognitive drivers of psychology to these marks, be it value propositions, positioning statements, then people begin to trust these marks. So marks became trust marks. So these evolutions of brand as a thing that we did to a thing that we experienced began to take root. And over time, we went from trust marks to love marks, right? I love the brand. These brands sort of resonate in me, in my heart and in my mind. And I would say the most powerful brands today move beyond being marks of love to being identity marks, the marks by which we subscribe our identity. Much like we identified cattle and, like to your point, people in centuries ago, today we buy brands and branded products that are extensions of our identity. And the brands who understand this are typically the brands who win in today's current zeitgeist.
So that's so interesting. And there are two things I was thinking about while you were talking. One of them is you led me to these thoughts. How our society, how our humanity is marked by the importance of branding. The same bag from the same manufacturer and the same lot of skins that bears one company's mark on it versus another company's or no company can represent thousands of dollars for that one bag. We see
That's
it all
right.
the time on social media. That was one thought I had and wanted you to talk about that, that how we move it to the level of identifying in a system of hierarchy or self-importance or lack of self-esteem sometimes. And, and then the other thought I'd love you to weave into that, Doctor, is how FUBU changed a consciousness about branding for a group of people that happen to be my tribe, but still is a group of people because we kind of tribe out through marketing, don't we, or branding?
1000%. I mean, I love the things you honed in on there because they're critical. So the first kind of lends to this idea of brands as marks and what these marks say about us and who we are. So let's start with the FUBU example. So the brands that were once associated with their category, with their value propositions, these brands, their products were practically indistinguishable from someone else's, right? Cattle, like I may sing to my cows at night and stroke their hair, so there's love coming through the milk, but by and large, the milk is the milk, right? There's a terrible difference. And today, the same thing kind of goes. Most products are parody, where you can't tell one product from another unless there's a logo on it. I do this example in my MBA course where for MBA students, I'll put a slide on the board and I'll have 3 different fleece jackets and I'll cover up the logo. And I'll say, to whom do these fleece jackets belong? What brands are associated with these fleece jackets? 100% of the time, they get it wrong, even if they're wearing the jacket themselves. But then when I reveal the logo, they go, oh, yeah, totally. And somehow or another, their Patagonia jacket just gets a little bit warmer when they see the logo. Of course, the value propositions don't change. It's just the cognitions and affects that are associated with it. So we take a brand like FUBU. What FUBU did is they moved beyond the value propositions of the product and transcended to a belief, a way of seeing the world, that this mark was a way by which we're able to signal tribalism. And I would say FUBU was way ahead of its time because while today the most powerful brands are brands we use to identify ourselves, the brands of the future, the brands of tomorrow are all about community, tribalism, that there are ways by which we signal us, not me as a unit, but us as a collective. So when I see someone wearing FUBU, even if their skin isn't melanated like mine, I know that we have a shared mental complex, right? A complexion that we see the world similarly. And therefore, those people are my people. And for humans, that is just an unbelievable shortcut because our brain's job is to predict the future to keep us alive. And these markers become ways by which we see, oh, you're one of us. And signal where we are on the social hierarchy. And I think luxury brands have benefited from this fact forever.
You are so right. I have one of the bags that I carry sometimes through airports is a very large Hermes bag,
Mm-hmm.
and it's interesting to see how people respond to that, to the point where I thought, "Am I buying into something?" It was a gift to me. Am I buying into something that I don't ascribe to? You know,
Mm.
you get a different kind of service, or you get a wink, or you get a hi, you know, or that kind. But the bag is getting the recognition, not me.
Yeah.
And if I chose to engage, maybe I benefit from it. But it does carry that far, doesn't it?
That's right. I mean, when you talk about history lessons, this goes way back to like the origins of consumption. For centuries, the global GDP was zero, practically zero, which
Mm-hmm.
means we weren't entering to any exchange, any kind of scale until 16th century Queen Elizabeth had the bright idea that she would use consumption as a means of aggrandizement, as a means of power. Her thinking was this, that royalty have everything, nobility will have a little less, peasants will have nothing. And the notion is that nobility would be compelled to consume in an effort to maintain their status in the social hierarchy. So consumption became the ways by which we peacock ourselves to the world, the
Mm-hmm.
ways by which we signal to the world who we are so that the world will respond to us and engage with us accordingly. And even, centuries later, we started to see some economic activity happening in Northern Europe. So companies started making more money, so they paid their employees more money, and those employees went and spent more money. And by the end of the 18th century, you had the Industrial Revolution, where now it's more consumption, more production, more. But at the core, from its very conception, consumption had nothing to do with value propositions, but everything to do with the psychological and sociological impulses that consumption would drive. And this is how we are today, right? I buy the sneakers that I buy, the jacket that I buy, the car that I drive, the phone that I use, the computer that I use. All these things are just signaling to the world who I am so that the world would engage with me accordingly. Even if I am not where I want to be in the social hierarchy perspective, I can at least signal it to get some semblance of it.
So that's powerful. And you reference sneakers. Let's think about this. And I'm not throwing shade to Nike or anything. But when you say Nike believes every human body is an athlete, which is what they put forward, uh, do you think a corporation really feels that way? Or are they just good marketers who can make consumers believe they feel that way? I'm flipping it a little bit, not just
No, I'm
what the
with you.
consumer believes about themselves, but what Nike wants the consumer to believe they believe about them.
Yeah.
Because think about it, if we're having a conversation about culture and commerce, it's an interesting place to start there, right? I mean, do you think we talked earlier fundamentally wired to join tribes, or is it just a natural evolution of the realities of capitalism? And does Nike really want us to think they think we're athletes, or do they really feel that way about the human body? Or can Nike think? Is Nike a collective of marketers who happen to have the 7 out of 10 votes that would be the campaign? Go with that, doctor.
I mean, you are tap dancing on all the good stuff. I mean, you are really hitting it here. I mean, so much goodness to unpack. So let's start with the first question, right?
Okay.
So does Nike believe every human body is an athlete? Having worked with Nike in two different capacities, I think so. I think Nike feels that and believes that. And I think it's informed in not just the way in which it goes to market, but how the company functions, right? How the way the company runs, its business, everything is like with the athlete in mind. And even people they hire are athletes as well, right? So I think that that's very much part of who they are. And I think that it permeates in its marketing communications, in its branding. They're able to sort of hug all the nuances of what it means to be an athlete because of their proximity to it. And there's certain brands who do this really well too, not just Nike and athletes, but Patagonia and people who are all about going green or environmentally conscious. It's embedded, it's baked into who the organization is. I think about a brand like Elf Cosmetics. Like
Mhm.
they believe in democratized access. And it's not just in the way they market their products, but even in the way they run their business, that everybody in the organization has equity in the company because they believe in democratized access. That's really, really powerful. And so it's not just a marketing gimmick, it's who they are. Now, there are tons of companies who say, "Ooh, this is a really good marketing strategy. Let's communicate that, but it's not who we really are." And I think once we get a chance to see behind the curtain and we go, "Oh, this isn't real at all," we lose a ton of trust. And it begins to erode at how we think about the brand. But I don't think that that's Nike, but it is for a lot of companies. Now, the real like juggernaut question you ask is like, well, aren't all these things driven by capitalism? And here's the truth. This truth kind of hurts. Is that while Nike engages in the culture of athletes, Patagonia engages in the culture of sustainability and people who are dedicated to the earth, Elf engages in the culture of democratized access or the democratized access in different cultural spheres. We're all operating in the culture of capitalism.
Mhm.
Like that is the hegemony. That is the dominant culture in which we all operate. As such that, instead of Elf saying we believe in democratized access so everybody has it free, that would be the truest of all democratized access. They have to charge something so they can stay in business, right? And of course, that's acceptable because that is the cultural frame in which we're operating. And I think that a company like Elf operates in this cultural frame with a tremendous amount of humanity, a tremendous amount of ethical integrity in such a way that they're able to exist as a company, but also do good. And I feel like that is the highest benchmark that we can evaluate companies and brands such that they live up to what they say they were about, but also they're able to operate as a business. Until we erode capitalism, that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What our mamas used to tell us was doing good and doing well and doing good at the same time.
Amen. And it's possible. I'm a professor here at the University of Michigan, Raw School of Business, and this is sort of how we think about our pedagogy: is that you can do good and do good business. That
Hmm.
doing good actually is good for business. And you see a company like Patagonia, a company like Elf, be a demonstrable representation of that very truth. And to me, like as a scholar, as a practitioner, these are the brands that inspire me. And I think create create the gold standard by which all brands should be measured.
Okay, so let's poke around a little bit more on this. Okay, and I'm going to act as contrarian to help stir the debate.
Please do. It's great.
All right. I want you to define why brands resonate with certain people, certain brands with certain people. You start to tip into that,
Yeah.
athletes to people who want to, be perceived as healthy and athletic, not necessarily athletes, just healthy,
Yeah.
or Ian like Jordan, but in a philosophical sense. Do you
Sure.
think this is something that's here to stay forever? Think about this, Dr. Light. At this point in time, people may shop at Patagonia because they
Mhm.
agree with Patagonia's express worldview, right? Or they'll
Yeah.
buy Tom's because of their mission, or they'll eat Chick-fil-A because they get closed on Sundays and it signals something to them, especially us from the deep South.
Yeah.
So on and so on. As a capitalist myself, I'm not knocking the system. I'm asking you to take this on because I don't know if you saw Chris Rock's last special. It
Oh
had
yeah.
a it had a joke about Lululemon in it, right? Selling
Yeah. That right.
$100 anti-racist yoga pants. You saw it?
That's right. Yeah, I saw it. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you respond to this sort of framework to a debate that posits brands have just become experts at messaging and pretending to have worldviews for the bottom line? I know you. Let's just get really up
Yeah. Let's
under
do it.
it. You're
Let's do it.
teaching students who are going to be next in line, and some of them will be in these companies we're talking about now.
That's right.
And by the way, let's disclaim we're not talking about these companies from a negative
Oh
perspective.
yeah.
We're using their brilliant success as examples.
Yeah. So we can critique the system in which they
Okay.
operate.
Yeah. Uh huh.
So I think it starts with like, well, what is a brand? we talked about brands as a mark of identity, at least in its starting. But brands are identifiable signifiers that conjure up thoughts and feelings in the hearts and minds of people. The things that we can identify, go, oh yeah, I know that thing. And that thing is signifying, it is representing, it is a vessel of meaning that makes us feel and think certain things with regards to a company, a product, a person, institution, organization, or an entity. They're vessels of meaning. So when we think about brands through that, that conceptual frame, we go, okay, brands are vessels of meaning. What do we want the brand to mean? As brand managers, we are managing meaning. And when your brand means a sharper razor, a faster car, a longer lasting battery, a shampoo with more body or whatever that's supposed to mean, then you go, okay, cool, great. So like you're the shampoo with good body. Until there's another shampoo with better body than yours, then I don't buy you anymore. And now you find yourself fighting a commodity war, like you're in an arms race for features and benefits. But when brands mean more than what they do, when they transcend the category and the value propositions to mean something more evocative, these are the brands that,
like Tommy Hilfiger saying my clothes are only for certain people. And it wasn't about size nor engagement.
Yeah, at that point, like Tommy Hilfiger meant racism in people's minds. They're like, dude, I thought Tommy was one of us. Like we rocked with Tommy. It meant something about the sort of Rockwellian.
We built Tommy with what they felt. We 100%. Made Tommy cool.
That's right. And, Tommy Hilfiger represented a sort of a waspy expression of wealth, a Rockwellian expression of wealth that was demonstrated through the aesthetics of preppiness, not unlike Ralph Lauren, which also was rising in stature within the hip hop.
And honestly, is some really solid built, well designed, good material clothing, all the stuff you used to buy stuff for when you wanted it to last, not just from durability, but it also had an aesthetic that was lasting.
That's right.
He really did that well.
Totally. I mean, the products were awesome. I mean, I still have Hilfiger shirts and polo shirts from high school.
I'm talking about Ralph Lauren now too, though. Ralph Lauren. Ralph Lauren has captured that.
100%. I have Ralph Lauren polo shirts that I still have that are literally 20 plus years old, for sure.
I had on a Ralph Lauren jacket on my recent travel, and I had people stopping me who were younger than the jacket, asking me where I got it.
And the thing is that, people weren't buying it because of the long-lasting sort of product features. They're buying it because they were cool. They're buying it because of what they meant. And this is what brands have always been. They're vessels of meaning. And the brands that have stronger meaning or greater meaning beyond what they do and what they create, these brands resonate within us more. They have much more of an emotional connection to us, and therefore we're more inclined to buy. Ivan Ross puts it this way, that people purchase a brand only if and when they are consistent and in some way enhances who we are and how we want to be seen. And we use these brands as identity marks, as projections of identities. And then we buy the brands that are in line with who we are. Now, years ago, as long as if you meant athlete, great. If you meant, cool, great. Like they were sort of, superficial is the wrong way to put it, but they were sort of myopic in what their meanings were. But now we live in a world where people are constantly projecting their identity through social networking platforms, through all this sort of transparency we have in the stages in which we present ourselves. Therefore, because I am bringing the brand with me in all the ways I project my identity, we expect more from brands. Like you can't just be athlete. What do you believe? What do you feel about this topic or that topic or what things are going on in my life? Because I want to make sure that they are congruent with how I project myself. So when companies engage in topics that are beyond sort of their realm of expertise, and sometimes they're trying to co-opt it and exploit it to have greater connections. In other cases, they are saying, of course, I'm going to engage in this because we've always been about this. So if you're Ben and Jerry's who create ice cream. That's what they do. But they've always been about activism. Then of course they're going to weigh in conversations that are beyond just ice cream. And I think that we know the ones that are real and the ones that are fake based upon how consistent they are in their ability or their willingness to go to the mat for those topics.
Absolutely, we do. And let's take it to another level, okay? So let's think about it this way, Doctor, and make corrections along the way, please. Um, let's think about whether or not the consumer can can capture a whole or what do you call it when you take something over, not hold hostage, but can take over, can take
Yeah.
over a brand and
Hijack
make
it.
it
Yeah.
mean something that the brand builders initially didn't. As an example, maybe a weak one, maybe you have a stronger one. We've just completed an election in the United States. Our listeners are from across the world, and they all paid attention to this election. And there were, and I saw it in several different media as well. There were certain brands that they said, if you're a Republican, you wear this shirt or you wear
Yeah.
this. If you're a
Yeah.
Democrat, you wear this. And I'm not so convinced that the people who built these brands had designed these brands around your political perspective.
Yeah.
But you say consumption is a cultural act. You've said that. And we
Yeah.
negotiate and construct society collectively. So break down what you mean by those two statements and how, if you believe they can, consumers can corral a brand to mean something different than the brand builders intended it to. Can they
Well,
take it hostage?
absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. It's that
Is that a crazy question?
no, that's a spot on question. I mean, you have been like knocking out the park each question, by the way. You know, the truth of the matter is that brands don't make meaning. They signal it. It's people who make meaning. We do. We decide what's acceptable. We decide what's cool. We decide what's in. We decide what's out. We legitimate things and delegitimate things through our discourse. We negotiate and construct the meaning and say, yep, this is cool. No, it is no longer the case. So brands, they do their best to signal it in hopes that people see it and go, oh yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think a strong example of this would probably be Jaguar. They just did a huge rebrand. And I'm sure in their minds, they're like, yo, we about to kill this. We're totally like elevating the brand. This is going to be great. And the market is like, nah, we're straight. Nah, no, thank you. And what's happening here is that the brand is saying one thing and the people are saying something different. And this is just how communication works. For instance,
I hated it when Jaguar started to look like every other car. I had that OG Vandenpla that was low to the ground, sleek, kind of looked like that when you drive it. And when they changed it, and I know that they sold to Ford. And,
that's right. That's
and
in the
then I
90s.
bought the first one that Ford put out, that really super big one, right?
Yeah.
And I just kind of started to think it's not Jaguar anymore. It has
That's
such
right.
a strong original identity
That's right.
that when Coca-Cola did that with the bottle, right?
That's right.
When
Yeah.
they
And we decided that, nah, no, thank you. We're not going for it. And that's how things work. Like we are constantly giving things meaning. I mean, from a political perspective, woke used to mean one thing. Now it means something totally different. DEI meant one thing. Now it means something totally different. Critical race theory meant one thing. Now it meant something totally different. These reworkings aren't from the author, the originator of the idea of the brand. They are contorted and reworked, recontextualized by the people. For instance, I was in Australia 2 weeks ago, and I'm talking to the concierge. And he's telling me, like, go here, go there, you see these things. He's like, and by the way, we have this affinity pool. It's so great. So like, just make sure, you bring your swim trunks and your thongs. And I was like, excuse me, sir? He's like, make sure you bring your thongs. And I was like, what kind of pool is this? I didn't realize that thongs in Australia means flip-flops. I was thinking like thongs, like, intimate apparel, and so meaning isn't fixed. Meaning is subjective, and that subjectivity is
Right before
mediated
Michael
through
Jackson said he
culture.
was bad, we thought bad was bad. We didn't know
That's
bad was
right.
good.
That's
Uh,
right. That's right. So it's
your book
this
for the culture. Your
that
book for the culture.
that's right.
You introduced that concept of cultural signals, right?
That's right.
And how powerful they are as tools for connections. And I think you used a conversation around what is it with your story of discovering and embracing the beehive? Because that leans into some of what we're talking about, doesn't it?
Yes. I mean, like,
You got me so excited. You got me so excited.
no, I'm here for it. I love it. I love it. I used to run digital strategy for Beyonce, and a part of the gig was about taking her offline fan club and moving it online. And we built this whole thing to engage fans, and it did not have the level of engagement that we thought it would have. And what the team realized while scouring the web to see what was going on is that there was already a community that existed that subscribed to not just being a fan of Beyonce, something far more. They had a culture, they had beliefs and artifacts, behaviors, and language that demarcated who they were. And the team decided to cut bait on the beehive and engage with them. Why? Because fandom just felt too small. This is about people who saw the world similarly and made meaning as a result of it. And what we're really getting down to here is that what do things mean? And that meaning is being negotiated and constructed by the people. And what we do as marketers is try to signal meaning in such a way that people go, yes, totally. And we look at every brand campaign that we considered a failure or considered, in some ways missed the mark. It wasn't because people were dumb. It wasn't because the marketers were malicious in their intent. It was because they didn't understand how people would have interpreted it. And as a result, they missed the mark. And this is really what, as marketers, what we're in the business of. Like I tell my students and my clients this, that we cannot intellectually talk about branding without talking about culture, because brands are vessels of meaning, and meaning is negotiated through our cultural subscription. And the better we understand it, the more likely we are to build stronger brands.
And we build brands from things that we buy and that we don't buy. I mean, I believe that, and you can tell me if I'm anywhere near true on this, that capitalism, democracy depends on capitalism. Capitalism builds democracy. That sounds rough, but
But it's
underneath.
true. I mean, we are a capitalist society, and therefore our democracy operates within those cultural frames. I mean, most of government is underwritten by brands, underwritten by corporations, and therefore it's inextricably linked. The idea of commercial engagement, capitalism, and government.
And whether we are commercializing one brand or whether we're commercializing a thing or a sense. Let me get myself out of trouble here and put it this way. When Michelle Obama was in a campaign and in the White House, Michelle wore nails. And before that, first ladies in the US didn't wear nails.
Mm-hmm.
Now, first ladies wear nails, whether they agree with her politics or whether they don't. And women in Congress wear nails. And women in boardrooms and corporations wear nails.
Yeah.
Whereas before, nails did not signify a position of belonging in power, even though it may be a position of coolness or a position of stage elegance. But if you owned the front row, you didn't wear nails. If you were on stage, you could. Help me, doctor, because you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
In terms of branding, how we can brand people collectively, whether you're selling it nails or them nails.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those nails and other
And
cultural.
am I anywhere near true in that?
You're spot on. I mean, like
That happened, right? That happened.
100%. I mean, just like Michelle Obama started wearing J. Crew, and J. Crew sales through the roof. These artifacts become signals of what's acceptable for people like us. And when we observe people and say, I either want to be them or I feel like I am them, what they wear, what they do, how they talk, how they engage in the world become sort of expectations of what people like us do. So much so, politically speaking, I have a friend whose husband always wears a red hat when he runs, and he used to love this red hat, but he stopped wearing it in 2016 because red hats, even from afar, in his mind, meant that he was a part of the MAGA movement, which he wasn't. And he didn't want to be mistaken as such. And therefore, he stopped wearing this hat that he loved so much. Like, when did red hats mean MAGA? That's
Or when did wearing red or blue signify you were in one gang or the other?
That's
But
right.
like my girlfriend, Paula Madison. Paula took braids into the boardroom and natural hair into the boardroom at NBC. And before she did that, women just didn't get promoted. Women didn't feel they had a sense of belonging or that they could climb a ladder if they wore their hair natural. And when you're out doing the news in all kinds of weather, I remember my hair was fried, dyed, and laid to the side. And I was in San Francisco in the early days of building my business, doctor. And we are going so off task here. But then again, we're on Mark. We're on Mark, right? Mark. And I was ready to make a brilliant presentation to a major company in the Bay Area. And I left there in such good spirit, walking less than 2 blocks that morning. Had not factored, at the time I lived in Southern California, had not factored that I was in the Bay Area. And from my hotel room to, you know what happened, right? I mean, maybe you got some Black women in your life with, I went from fried, dyed, laid to the side to my hair was the Angela Davis would be, envious of that afro I walked in with, which was not how I was dressed to appear. Yeah. And so, we do things, and like you've talked before, okay, about tribes versus demographics, and that's where I'm leaning in on this because it's interesting to me. During my lifetime thus far, I've gone from identifying, and I've said this publicly, as a Bryant to identifying as a Bryant Howroyd post-marriage. And it was well into my professional success before I reached enough personal success to identify as a Janice. And now I'm a JBH. You're a Collins and a Detroit native. You have your own tribes you belong to. Talk with the family listening to you right now about why brands should consider thinking of tribes versus demographics.
Well,
does that take this conversation further than you want it?
Yeah, I'm with you. So by and large, demographics don't describe who we are, right? They are ways by which we can easily categorize people, but they don't accurately get to who we are. If we say I'm a Black man, you go, okay, great, cool. Like, that's one way in which one might self-identify.
Wait a minute, say that again. Say that again. That's strong, because before you said that, it could be easy for those of us listening to you to think demographics exactly describe who we are. Who are your customers? Who is our family? Who's listening to us? And you're positing differently. Please make that statement again about the definition of demographics.
So demographics, they're ways by which we describe people. They are easy, but they're not accurate. They are they're accessible, but they aren't real. They're boxes that we put people in. And these boxes help us make sense of the world very quickly. The world is complicated, it's messy, right? But if I put you in a box, oh, you're just that. You're a Black man, and all the things that I think about Black men are now associated to you. If you're a woman, all the things that I think about women are associated to you, and typically they're always stereotypical in nature. They're typically always some trite sort of characteristic that ultimately do not dictate or predict what people are likely to do. Now, why does that matter for marketers? Because our job is to get people to move, to get people to adopt behavior, and we segment the market taking a heterogeneous market where everyone's different and put them in homogeneous like clusters to identify the people that are most likely to adopt behavior. Demographics is the worst way by which we can do that, because tell me something that all Black people do and I'll wait for you to say something racist. I hear this all the time with girls here at the school. They'll say, all men are dogs. I'm thinking to myself, no, your boyfriend's a dog. There's a difference, right? And so we put people in these groups. They don't actually get to who they are. Instead, we should be thinking about how they self-identify. Now, savvy marketers think, well, no, psychographics is better. Yes, they are. When we think about people's attitudes, their interests, their passion points, they're better descriptors than demography are, for sure. But what do you think informs what you like? What do you think informs, what your interests are? It's your identity. It's your cultural subscription. I think of it this way. Which Alex is more committed to running? Alex who is a Gen Z demographic, Alex who likes to run psychographic, or Alex who is a runner identity? Clearly it's the latter. That Alex is going to get up and run even if she's tired, she doesn't want to do it, it's raining, it's cold, she had a long night. That Alex runs anyway because people like me do something like this. When we target people, we segment people based on their cultural subscription, their identity, their tribalism. Not only do we more accurately describe who they are, but they're also predictors of what people like us do. I'm a Collins. We believe family and church come first. Therefore, Sunday mornings, I'm in the church sanctuary. Why? Because that's what we do. And because I self-identify as a Collins, I show up to church on Sunday mornings. The same thing goes with every identity marker, every cultural subscription to which we ascribe our personhood, which makes it a more powerful way to target people.
Is that why families will kill daughters or family members who step outside of how that family has branded itself?
I mean, sure. I mean, for those families, you go, you're not one of us. So you excommunicate them the same way you would do in a religious affiliation. You're like, you're not one of us. You are not living up to what it means to be one of us. And therefore you can't be with us.
And you can't wear the brand.
It's right. Exactly. So brands become the same way too. If people like me wear this brand, then this is something that people like me do. But the minute that it gets hijacked, or people who are not like me start wearing the brand, I go, oh, I guess I'm not wearing that anymore. I'm not going there anymore. I can't shop there anymore, or eat there, or wear their clothes, or watch their movies, or listen to their kind of music, because people like me don't do things like this. And this is how culture moves forward. Do people like me do something like this? The answer is yes, we do. If the answer is no, we don't. We made that decision hundreds, if not thousands of times a day, not because of what the product is, but because of who we are and what the brand means to people like us.
And in our family, growing up during the civil rights in the Deep South, we had such high standards that I believe in, that we were expected to live to as a Bryant. And I've carried a lot of that into who I am. And so there's this interesting thing for me around, well, if you identify with a brand, regardless of who you are demographically, do you become that brand? And people go broke trying to be that brand if that brand is a thing versus sometimes a behavior or, an ideology. Dr. William, and I know I dropped that kind of empty there. Share with us an example of a lesser known brand that has successfully leveraged some cultural signals, because you're big on cultural signaling, to build a strong community around their product or service.
So I think about a brand like Liquid Death. Liquid Death sells water, 2 hydrogens and an oxygen. They don't get more parity than water. Even though some people say, no, the electrolytes and the alkaline and the pH balance. And to them, I would cite research that shows that people can't tell the difference between tap water and bottled water, let alone 2 different kinds of bottled water, right? So it is negligible in their ability to differentiate one product than the other. But Liquid Death doesn't just sell water. Liquid Death operates at an ideological level. It believes in death to plastics, making the world more healthy and more sustainable by death to plastics. So what do? They sell their water, 2 hydrogens and oxygen. They sell it in a tall boy can that is recyclable. And everything that Liquid Death does, in all the ways in which it goes to market, they go to market with that same irreverence, the tonality, the personality of the brand brand is a reflection of that irreverence that the brand holds. And therefore, people who see the world similarly goes, that's my brand. Even though what's inside the can is just like what's inside the water bottle over there, they choose Liquid Death because the brand, the mark of ownership is congruent with my identity. And I find myself in community with people like me. Liquid Death has been around for 5 years. It's a $1.2 billion business.
That couple are tight. They are tight. I admire what they've done, and they've elevated. You know, when folk used to say, "It's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's
That's
not
right.
what you sell, it's how you sell it."
That's right. That's right.
Growing up, my generation had community leaders, and today we've got like Instagram influencers and TikTok stars. Doctor, how do you see these new digital trendsetters mixing or blending with the OGs of influence? Does this have any particular meaning for where our culture is headed?
Yeah, I think these people are still, in many ways, community leaders. You know, the influencers, the people who are in prominent public spaces, they represent something. They are brands, just like Martin Luther King had his brand of leadership, which is different than Malcolm X's brand of leadership, which is different than Marcus Garvey's brand of leadership. And they all were brilliant. They all were great orators. They all were very committed to the cause. But people followed the leaders that were expressive of how they saw the world.
Mother Teresa, Mahatma Gandhi.
That's right. That's right. People followed people that preached the gospel that was aligned with how they see the world. The same thing kind of goes here. There are people who subscribe to being a Swiftie because Taylor Swift's point of view on the world is more aligned with theirs. Beyonce, similarly, she also, like Taylor Swift, believes in women's empowerment, but a different brand of women's empowerment. So people are like, I'm in the Beehive, I follow that. Or maybe it's a sense of sort of irreverence, like Rihanna. So they find themselves in the Navy. These people represent an ideology, and people form communities and engage in communities around the ideologies that these people represent and find themselves connected and engaged with it because of their congruent ways of seeing the world.
Yeah, yeah. Something that we both have in common is that we believe we're on this earth to serve.
Amen.
You're an author and a teacher, and I do my best in my capacity as an entrepreneur and as a mentor. For you as a teacher, what excites you most about the future? You're meeting with students on one of this country's really eminent campuses, and you're extending that work beyond. You just left travel doing that work. What are you most optimistic about, Doctor? And how do you stay excited if you're excited about the future? You brought joy, you brought glee into the hello, into the welcome that we had a few minutes ago.
I am fired up about the future because I believe that there's a level of curiosity among today's youth, just like there were in years past, and they're going to do it better than us, right? We have to say it. Every round must go higher. Every round must get better. And I think that the work that you're doing, the work that I'm doing, people like us who are invested in serving, are creating footholds for people to start better than we did so they can do better than us, where they have different perspectives than we had so that they can operate in the world with a level of humanity that we didn't. I look at my career and I'm very proud of the work that I did, but it's also very glaring the mistakes that I made, where I could have been much more empathetic, where I could have been much more human, where I could have been much more impactful or empowering for the people around me. And I'm using those experiences to help pour into the future so that the people that are coming next are better than us. That keeps me very, very, very encouraged because I see it. I see the energy in them. I see the zeal in them. I can see sort of the fire in their eyes with regards to wanting to make an impact on the world. I think that, years past, really just sort of making money was almost sort of the benchmark by which we measured people's success. But I feel today the zeitgeist is more so around the impact that you can have. And as we said earlier, you can do good business by doing good. And it's the prioritization of doing good, I think, sort of resonates in the future. And I'm just very much encouraged by what I see.
I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being that, demographically or not. Um, and you use the word better. In my company, we designed at my request how we compensate people during a contest season, and it became something that we live with, and many of the entrepreneur people have entrepreneurial opportunity in my company. And so we look at it as not who did the best, meaning who brought in the most, but who had the better improvement over what they'd done before. So
Mm-hmm.
who brought in the most may have stayed at 1 million for 3 months, but who did better than they did before
Yeah,
by the largest increment may have been 800,000. You get what I'm
that's right.
saying? And
That's right.
allowing people to measure their successes. And so defining better, I think, is something that can be a whole chapter in branding, because the idea of branding is to get your product better coverage, better sales, better quality, whatever. And I think better could be so important in that. It's not my forte, but I live or die by people's marketing and how that occurs.
I
Oh,
love that because
you do? You do?
what it's pointing to is that we don't reward stagnation, you
Right,
reward improvement.
right.
Stagnation is that like you kill it, but you've been doing the same thing for the last 5 years. Like you're
Yeah.
not getting better. And while we're grateful for what you bring forward, what we want to reward is the people that continue to find inches, people who continue to get better, because those folks, their potential is limitless. And I think for me, as a educator, as a scholar, I always find myself gravitating to the people who are curious and who have high potential, but are brave enough, courageous enough to actually realize that potential. Those people are going to be great wherever you drop them. All you have to do is provide the environment for them to do that very thing. And you, as an entrepreneur, I'm sure you see that in people and go, "Oh, come over here. Come here, girl. Let me come under my wing. Like, let's help you be great because you are going to make all of us
Yeah,
better."
you may be killing it, but are you bold enough to tear it apart and do better?
That's right.
Marty Newheimer was a guest on this show a few months back, and he's written several books about branding. I'm sure you're familiar with him. He shared some opinions with me about the lost value in branding, and he used the example of after Elon Musk changed the brand name from Twitter to X. So
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that decision and just any opinions you have on where that brand is today as a
Sure.
result of that change.
The acquisition of Twitter by Elon Musk, the changing it to X, to changing the policies, essentially it was eroding the meaning that X had in people's minds, or Twitter had in people's minds, right? The meaning that Twitter had for people became less and less its reality as it became closer and closer a reflection of Elon Musk. And therefore, the value of Twitter began to decline, not just in its distinctive brand assets like the bird and the name Twitter. Getting rid of those things, you go, man, like the awareness, the understanding, the cognitive real estate that the brand had in people's minds, to remove those distinctive brand assets just seemed ridiculous, like fiduciarily irresponsible. But all the equity, all the cognitions and associations that we transferred from Elon Musk over to Twitter, now X, only only compromised whatever goodwill and good standing value Twitter had in our minds. And as a result, it's a platform that continues uh, to lose advertisers, to lose users, to lose relevance in the cultural zeitgeist. Not because the product has changed as much as because what it means has changed.
Mm. In your book, you analyze both successful and unsuccessful attempts at cultural engagement by brands. What do you believe is the most common misstep companies make when they're seeking to align themselves with cultural movements?
I think it's twofold. One, they don't know who they are as a brand, and they don't know who these people are as people. I think oftentimes marketers think about their brand and the meaning associated with it is based on what the company does, what it makes, what it produces. And then they go like, we produce headphones. So we are in the headphone business, which Theodore Levitt referred to as marketing myopia. And on the other end, they don't know who they are beyond what they make. They don't know their consumers well. They don't know the people well. They define them by demography, or they see them based on what they do, their consumers, their voters, their subscribers, their, viewers. But who are they as human beings? Without seeing people in their humanity, it makes it almost impossible to engage in their culture in any meaningful way that is not exploitative or, quite frankly, just void of any kind of proximity. But when brands know who they are, they know what they believe and how they see the world, and they understand the cultural characteristics of the people they're trying to engage, that creates the perfect recipe for the brand to find places, footholds where it has license to contribute to the cultural discourse, paying mind to all the conventions that make up the culture.
So then, how can brands maintain authenticity while also evolving their cultural positioning over time?
Yeah, well, authenticity is all about being one's truest self despite the context. And if you don't know who you are, you can't be authentic, right? Lauryn Hill said, how are you going to win if you ain't right within? Right. So if you don't know who you are, there is no way to be authentic. It doesn't compute. The calculus just doesn't math. So we have to start with who we are and then be consistent who we are. Now, who we are isn't what we do. It's how we see the world and therefore navigate in the world accordingly. So the way I see the world, like my driving sort of conviction about the world.
Coca-Cola couldn't change that bottle shape until it moved to a can.
Well, I would say this, that Coca-Cola, they sell soda, but what they believe is in optimism. They believe in happiness.
Yes.
And therefore,
I'd like
that truth, that's right, hillside, right? Like that truth never changes. That truth stays the same, but the way in which Coke engages in happiness, engages in optimism, that changes with the time. So they are authentic because they are being true to who they are. But the way that manifests over the years changes, and that's just fine.
Well, let's go back to my initial questions about the practicality of the system itself. Doctor, do you believe that the cult of corporations is fundamentally a good thing?
W, the what? Say it part again. Say it again.
Do you believe that the cult of corporations is fundamentally a good thing? I mean, should we accept what culture is, or should we just work toward changing it in any specific ways?
Well, I think that culture in of itself is neutral. It's not good. It's not bad. It is. But the same things that can be used for good are the same things that can be used for bad. So while we'll say like, well, the cult of consumption is not good, I'll say it's not bad either. By that I mean people who are like zealots or very high in affinity for Star Trek, they come together as Trekkies. It's through their consumption that facilitates their community. People who love Beyonce, the Beehive, come together through consumption. People who love Taylor Swift, Swifties, come together through consumption. People who are way into sneakers come together as sneakerheads through consumption. In many ways, we make our culture material through consumption. Right? Consumption are ways by which we tangibilize our cultural subscription. If you're Jewish, you wear a yarmulke. You probably bought your yarmulke from somewhere, right? So consumption becomes a way by which you're able to tangibilize your cultural affiliation. Are these cults bad? Well, what is cult short for? Cult is short for culture, right? It is not inherently bad. It is bad once it becomes harmful. It is bad once it becomes exploitative. It becomes bad when the value that it provides positively is outweighed by the value that comes from the negative repercussions. Michael Porter would say that, value is the sum of all consequences, good and bad. So when we think about, is this culture good? It depends on the sum of consequences.
Wow. Wow. Uh, so a couple of girlfriends and I were watching something, and a commercial came through. We don't watch the stuff commercial free. And I'm as interested in the commercials as I am in the content of the
Yeah.
program. Oftentimes, I'm sure you watch them too. But this one commercial has this young man running or walking, and then he stops and he lifts his elegantly sneakered foot up and he pulls a wipe out of his pocket, a baby wipe, and he wipes the whites. You're laughing. You've seen it. You've seen
That's
it.
right.
You've seen
Yeah,
it.
totally.
And we were laughing because we were like, he could take his mom's mascara wipes or his sisters or his dad's or his brother's mascara wipes and wipe those whites clean. And and I suggested, well, maybe it's a different product for skin than for leather, right? But we were laughing because that was a product built on the consumption of sneakers. And I don't know that sneakers own that product, and that's the way the world goes. But it's so funny when you were talking just now about consumption building on consumption. I'm thinking, yeah. And this commercial I saw where he stops and he cleans his whites of his sneakers. And,
Yeah.
for me, it suggests a certain thing as a baby boomer, but for someone 3 generations beyond me or fresher than me, it may be an essential.
That's right. I mean, understanding
Building a
the
brand.
understanding the importance of clean sneakers for sneakerheads create opportunities for brands or branded products to solve jobs to be done for
Yeah.
sneakerheads, right? Which is why you see you see holders for hats so your hat doesn't get dented. You see, shoe trees that we used to use as kids in our church shoes, but never in our sneakers. But so
Right.
that your Jordans don't get creased up, you have shoe trees to make sure that your Jordans stay crispy because that's a part of the culture. Understanding the nuances, the characteristics, and the conventions of the culture create opportunity for brands to engage in it, to solve problems for it. People go, thank you so much. I needed that because you understood it. This is the kind of product that I need, and this is the kind of brand that I want to consume from.
And then building economies from it. Because when I was growing up, we didn't need a cell phone. People really did live as long and sometimes healthier. Um, and yet a cell phone now is essential even for children when you have latchkey and circumstances, etc. So we build economies on things that start out one way and become so significant and then become so essential in our minds. What?
The literature says it this way, that culture influences a consumer's social needs, which in turn is satisfied by the use and ownership of innovative products. That we consume the products because of the social needs that culture ignites, right?
Yeah.
If people are doing like this, I got to get it like this. I remember going to high school. I remember this so vividly, so vividly. I remember going to high school. So this is in the 90s. In middle school, we used to all wear like Disney clothes. Like, we're Aladdin t-shirt. Like, that was like my coolest t-shirt was an Aladdin t-shirt. Like, I remember just like, we were bow biters in our sneakers. That was a cool thing. And I remember my first year, the first day of high school as a high school freshman at Cass Technical High School. I show up I had a Mighty Mouse t-shirt on with matching yellow pants. I was so proud of this outfit. And everyone that wasn't a freshman, they were all wearing Hilfiger and Polo, very preppy style. And I was like, oh my goodness, I am so out of sync with the cultural expectations of this school. And when my mother picked me up for my first day of school, I was like, we need to go to the mall right now. I need a completely new wardrobe. We're burning everything because what I have, the products that I have that just 8 hours ago were the coolest thing ever, was no longer cool because of what the people like me had dictated was acceptable. And we navigate life like that in all aspects of life. Every facet of social living is informed by our culture and therefore influencing our consumption.
And our culture as it ascribes to our tribes tend to have us not only belong but also isolate. You, I I'm going to wear an afro in the 70s and be a part of my tribe. And it's also going to isolate me when I go in for that management job in
That's
a
right.
corporation that's not ready or not accepting of that type of culture. Um, it's fascinating. We could go on forever, and I pray we do go on again about it. What practical advice can you give our family who's listening to you right now, Doctor, who want to promote some type of cultural inclusivity into their personal or their
Mhm.
professional
Yep.
lives?
I would always say it starts with how do you see the world? Simon Sinek calls it your why. I call it your conviction. I like the word conviction because it's not just a sort of beliefs that you have, but it's something you're willing to stand on, even if you're the only one. What do you believe beyond the products you make, beyond what you create and what you sell? What do you believe? And then I would say find the people who believe what you believe. Find the believers. Find find the find the Trekkies among the people who watch Star Trek. Find the Beehive among the people who listen to Beyonce. Find the Swifties among the people who listen to Taylor Swift. Find the liberals among the people who vote Democrat. Find the conservatives, the evangelicals among the people who vote Republican. Find your people and then preach the gospel. Preach your point of view. And what happens is that when you preach your point of view, someone goes, finally, someone said, I've been feeling this way forever. Finally, it said, and they'll use your brand as a way to project their identity. And they'll share with other people who are just like them, and they'll share with other people just like them, and so on and so on and so on, creating a reverberating network effect that goes from niche, small, to big in scale.
Wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Is there anything else you want to share before we go 4 for 4?
Yeah, I would say that, culture is the most influential external force on human behavior. And the more we understand culture, the more likely we are to leverage its influence. And those who understand it are typically more successful. And those who don't understand it are typically more influenced by those who are successful.
Doctor, doctor, you know your mama is proud of you, right? And you know, Dr. Marcus Collins, you are a rapper. You are a rapper to my soul. You got to come back. You got to come back.
I would love it. I feel we have so much more room so much more land to run around. So I'm down for it.
All right. So let's go 4 for 4.
Let's
Okay.
do it.
You're hosting a dinner. You get, and there are no right or wrong answers here. You get
Okay.
to invite 4 people from any time in history to present. No AI folk yet. Okay. Just, humanoids. So humans.
You got
Uh,
it.
who's at your table and why?
Solomon, he was the wisest man to walk the earth. Michael Jackson,
Was he
because
black? Was he black?
he was Jewish, but he had melanin in his skin for
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
So I would Solomon, King Solomon, David's son, wise man to walk the earth. I would say Michael Jackson because he's the best artist, greatest artist ever in my purview. Um, I would probably have my grandfather, who has passed, Bishop Joseph Thomas, who's probably the wisest man that I've known there. And I think I would have my daughter, my eldest daughter, Georgia, with me because I would want her to witness and see greatness on display.
Beautiful. That is wonderful. What 4 pieces of music, not podcasts, music, are you listening to right now that you can share with our family and why?
Oh, for sure. I am from a new music perspective. I'm listening to Tyler the Creator's new album, Cornucopia, which is fantastic. But what's always constantly on replay is Frank Ocean, Boys to Men, and Take Six.
Oh,
Constantly.
wow. Okay. You got a little bit of old school soul in you.
Oh yes.
I love it. I love it. We probably have some of the same playlist.
I bet.
What 4 books do you recommend to our family and why?
Well, the first would be For the Culture for sure.
Yes.
So I know the guy who wrote it is pretty good. um,
And we're recommending that as well.
and I'm grateful for it. Fair Culture, for sure. Um, Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. This book, like, it literally changed my life. It forced me to see the world in ways I never had before and rang a bell that I couldn't unring. And that really became sort of the foundation for my exploration into the behavioral sciences. Just unbelievably well written. Sapiens. I think it's just a great chronicle on the human condition, where we started to where we are. And as a social scientist, I find myself just gravitating to this understanding of us. And I guess lastly will probably be Culture Strategy by Doug Holt and Doug Cameron. Douglas Holt is sort of, like one of the stewards, the cornerstones of my field of research called consumer culture theory. And he and Craig Thompson and Rob Kozenet and Grant McCracken, these guys are like giants in my field. And Doug Holt's culture strategy really create a foundation by which I've built, the majority of how I see the world as a practitioner and as a scholar. And so if anyone's ever is curious about this way, I think Doug Holt's work is a great doorway in, if not for the culture.
That could be a great book for entrepreneurs as well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so here we are going 4 for 4. What 4 pieces of advice do you give to our family? And if you're sharing advice that was given to you, please pay homage to the original author.
Absolutely. So this is a quote that one of my pastors used to use. I know he got it from somewhere, so I don't know where the original quote was, but it's essentially this: who you are is God's gift to you. Who you become is your gift to God. Right. So be mindful about who you become. So that's the first. The other one is from a gentleman named Steve Stout, who was a record label executive who started an ad agency called Translation, with whom I worked for 4 years. And he would always evangelize. He has so many like Stout-isms, we'd call it. But one of the ones that really stuck for me was this idea that if you have an idea that is logically sound and no one gets it, you're probably onto something. Right. And for me, as an entrepreneur, you know this oh too well. When you see a thing and you say it and people are like, is that really a thing? You go, oh, okay, I'm all over this. Stout, as a serial entrepreneur, he constantly sort of evangelized this. There's a Steve Jobs quote that says, if you look at everything around you, it was made by someone no smarter, no brighter than you. Average people have made all things around us. And if that be the case, what's keeping you from making a dent in the world? Right. And the last bit of advice, words of wisdom that I tell my daughters all the time, it actually comes from a song lyric by Jewel, who's like a folk singer. And she would say, it doesn't take a talent to be mean. And it's like, it doesn't take a talent. Like the people who are mean, and you go, you're not like flexing any like great ability in your meanness, right? It actually is far more of expression of your greatness when you can be kind to people when the situation doesn't allow itself to sort of facilitate kindness.
Wow. Dr. Marcus Collins, this has been such a pleasure to talk with you. I look forward to many more pleasures of talking with you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for caring. Thank you for teaching. And welcome back anytime from my heart to your home.
Thank you so very much. That makes 2 of us. I'm extremely grateful.